Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sky Career Talks, where we connect students with professionals sharing their real-world experiences and career journeys. My name is Princess, and today I'm excited to be joined by Javid Lewis, who will be sharing insights into his professional path. Javid earned his bachelor's degree from Rutgers University and has built an impressive career across social media, content strategy, digital marketing, and more. He's currently the director of content strategy and social platforms at Visa, where he's leading global social and content work for one of the most recognized brands. And in addition to his work at Visa, he also teaches social media strategy as an adjunct professor through Rutgers Continuing and Professional Studies. Javid, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited to learn more about your journey. And to start us off, could you please introduce yourself and share a little bit more about your current role?
Thank you. Well, first, thank you, Princess, for having me and that great introduction. I can't believe that that is me, but I guess it's me. Great to see everyone who's watching this. Again, my name is Javid, and I'm currently at Visa, where my role is the director of content strategy and social platforms. So, what does that mean? That means that I help lead and shape how Visa shows up globally around some of our biggest sponsorship moments. So, things like the Olympics, things like FIFA. Lots of big sponsorship moments for Visa. And what my team is responsible for is creating the content, working with the creators, and creating that ecosystem to build awareness and ultimately to drive Visa's business goals.
Great. That sounds like you really are working with a lot of different projects, and there's a lot that goes into those like social media campaigns that we might not see, like behind the scenes. So I was wondering what a typical day might look like for you in this role, especially when you're leading content and like socials at such a large global brand.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the biggest things I'd say about a career in social and comms and almost anything you're going to get into in this day and age is there's almost no typical day. Some days I'm up in the morning and I'm trying to problem solve, and we're trying to figure out why a certain piece of content didn't perform on TikTok. Other days I'm strategizing and putting together strategy decks where we're looking to pitch people internally or externally. And then more recently, what I've been thinking a lot about is like AI and how we work differently and work smarter. So with AI becoming like such a big focus for everyone we know is, looking at the things that I do every day and thinking of what are parts of my role that I can use AI to help support. What are things that there's new technology out that I can automate? So every day is a little bit different, but ultimately my goals remain the same, which is, creating the content and creating this sort of ecosystem so that when you're seeing V's out in the world, you're like, this is a cool brand. This is a brand that I associate with. This is something that is sort of a symbol for me that sort of that I'd be proud to pull out. That's always what my day is about, is how I can, push the brand further.
Yeah, it's definitely true. I think there's a lot of like strategy and execution that goes on, like within that role, especially. And I know you were mentioning like AI and how you're using that more to help you like automate different tasks. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about like maybe what you find interesting about AI or kind of like what AI tools you might be using, if they're like internal tools at Visa or maybe just like open source
Yeah.
tools you're using.
Happy to, happy to. So I'm sure if you're watching this video, you've probably heard a lot about AI. Everyone's concerned, is AI going to take our jobs? What's going to happen? And I think people are right to be concerned. So how I deal with it is I've been like knee deep in AI, doing the research, listening to podcasts, using the different platforms. Like most people, I started off using ChatGPT, and I was a heavy ChatGPT user, and I was using it almost in the way that people use Google, asking questions and getting simple responses. As I got into it, I learned a little bit more about the query. More recently, I've been experimenting with Claude. So with Claude, what I've done is, and I get the paid subscription for all of these, so I can like really experiment. I'll pay the $20 a month. But
Yeah.
with Claude, what I'm doing is I've downloaded it on my personal computer. I've sort of synced it to PowerPoint. I've synced it to my calendar. I've synced it to my Gmail, and now it's helping me sort of take all of those things. So, if I'm trying to coordinate a meeting with you, for instance, I can use Claude and say, "Hey, I want to meet with Princess. What are
Yeah.
the best days for me to do that this week?" And it'll give me a recommendation based on looking at my schedule. So those are things just in my personal life I'm starting to experiment with, like how I can use AI almost as an assistant.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to take all of our jobs. I think it's going to be like a just a strong crutch that we lean on to supercharge us. I've been looking, and again, in my reading, a lot of the early research says like what's really happening is, as opposed to AI sort of coming in and taking jobs, yes, there will be some roles that could be lost, but a big part of what's happening is you'll be expected to do more as a professional, right? So maybe a job that took 10 people, now you do it with 3 people in the support of AI. So I'm looking for ways I can use AI to help me do that, to like almost supercharge what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So that's just a little bit about how I'm using AI. I am knee deep. I'm not like I've drunk the Kool-Aid and I'm just trying to figure out how I can, use it to help make me a better professional.
Yeah, that's great. I definitely think it's smart to kind of like use AI across the different systems. So like syncing it locally and just taking full advantage of like the benefits that it can provide you, especially I know your schedule might be like very packed and it can definitely help you like streamline a lot of those things you have to do like emails and coordinating and everything like that. But I did want to ask a little bit more about your academic background. So could you share a little bit more about that and how you maybe think your education prepared you for your professional journey and your professional career?
Sure. So when I went to Rutgers, it took me a while to sort of settle into what I wanted to do. But a couple things that happened is one, um, I was lucky enough to make some good connections. Actually, one of the things that got me started in my career was I started a blog early in my career, and I started that blog with one of my former Rutgers roommates.
Oh, really?
And the blog was just we were posting, but what ended up happening is we got a shout out from Kanye West. He said, "Hey, this is one of my favorite websites." A couple
Wow.
months later, Kim Kardashian posted on Twitter about us. Justin Bieber tweeted about us, and all of a sudden, this thing that we were doing as a hobby became a business. So
Yeah.
for a large part of my 20s, that was what I did. I managed and ran this website for about 5 years or so with my Rutgers college classmate, right? So that was like, what better Rutgers connection than that? And DJ Academics, who's actually a popular blogger, funny enough now, is actually also a Rutgers graduate. So, there is this thread of Rutgers graduates sort of being in content and doing these things, which I think is interesting. In terms of my education, I think the way that Rutgers prepared me was that it taught me to be nimble. Um, Funny enough, a lot of the technology, a lot of the things that now today are a core of my career weren't around when I was a student. Without dating myself, there was no TikTok, there was no Instagram, right? These things didn't exist. So I couldn't prepare for a world that wasn't there yet. But in being nimble, and understanding how to problem solve, those are all skills that I felt like I learned at Rutgers, right? It's a really large university. Some of your classes are smaller, as you know. Other classes you may go in and there's a couple hundred people in the class. Those environments, to me, they teach you how to do things to say, okay, there's 350 people in the class. I need help or I need to stand out. What are things that I can do? And those challenges only get bigger and bigger over time. So I think that was the greatest thing that I got from Rutgers. It was, obviously what happened in the classroom was great, world-class education, had lots of great times, went to lots of fun parties, joined lots of clubs. But I
Yeah.
think just the ability to be nimble, and the ability to sort of show up and figure out how to position yourself for success was something that was instilled in me during my time at Rutgers.
Yeah, I definitely think that's very great advice. Like knowing how to like kind of pivot and position yourself when different opportunities arise is a very great skill to have. And I know you were describing how you were managing that website and you got a lot of like attraction from it. So I was wondering what was kind of another like particular turning point or defining moment that helped shape your career, even being that experience if you want to go into that more or something else that happened to you.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to have so many of these moments, but one other moment that really shaped my career was actually when I took a role at Ticketmaster as their first head of social media.
Mm.
So fast forward from my blogging days, this is many, 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 many years later now. I'm not doing blogging. I've sort of taken everything I've learned and now I'm doing that in corporate environments, right? In the same way I would create content for my blog and interview celebrities and create news and get things to keep people engaged. I'm now doing that on behalf of brands. And sort of the culmination of this was I was at Twitter at the time before it became X, and Elon had just bought the company and it was getting a little rocky. and sort of looking for the next opportunity. And trending, funny enough, on Twitter that day was this role at Ticketmaster, and you could still find some of these articles, and Forbes has written about it, and Business Insider had written about it, and it was all about like how this was basically the toughest role in social media, right?
Mhm.
This was fresh on the heels of Ticketmaster having some complaints about the Taylor Swift online sale. There was a Beyonce tour coming up. There was a
Yeah.
bunch of big things happening that, you imagine millions of people coming to a website and wanting a ticket. And then people see the prices and they can't get, so you have the problem of access to the tickets. And then you have the problem of people get access and they're like, well, I think these tickets are too expensive. And then they're also venting about that. So you
Yeah.
have all of these things sort of happening. Um, and I applied for this job. And the reason I applied for it was not because I thought I could make the coolest TikToks for Ticketmaster, was because I had a strong background in crisis management. And I also had a strong background in social listening and measurement. So what I knew how to do was I knew how to go in and I knew how to properly assess what their actual issue was, right? I knew I had the skills and I knew I can get the tools to go in and be like, all right, here's actually what people are mad about. And like, here's also a plan of like things that we can do to solve it. And that was a big role for me because again, one, because it was highly publicized. It was my first time getting a job that was literally written about in like media. And here I was the person who took on the hardest job in social media. And then I was also building a team from zero. So since I was the first head of social that the company had, there was very little protocol, process, et cetera. So I was building all these things from scratch, hiring the right type of people to come in and do that role. So that role to me was like, that was a critical one as I think back on my career, because that's what really gave me the courage to say, like, hey, I can come into an organization, I can build a team. Not
Mhm.
only that, I can do it under pressure. And what was the result of all of this was that actually during my time at Ticketmaster, one of my big goals was how do we sort of get from underneath like some of this negative chatter around like what had happened with Taylor. And we had a goal of raising the online sentiment, and we did that. During the time I was there, we were able to raise the sentiment back to what it was pre-Taylor Swift incident, which was a huge win. So that meant there's always going to be people complaining about ticket prices, and some of those things you can't control. But it was nice to bring that sentiment for the company back up. And that's how I'm able to, take the work that I do in social media, which some people just see as like, oh, he's making like cute TikToks. But when you can say I'm changing the sentiment of a brand, or I'm changing how people feel about a brand, that's when you get closer to like, oh, you're actually having real business impact. And that's what the important space to be.
Yeah, that's amazing. Wow. I think it's really important the lessons you can learn from being the first of the first to do something. Like the first head of social media is an incredible title, and I think you really displayed that. You learned a lot through that experience. And I know like in that type of position, you're really at like the intersection of creativity and, like strategy, like you were explaining, with kind of changing the perception of Ticketmaster at that time. So I was wondering kind of what technical skills or even soft skills you built prior to that position that helped you get into that role. And then also, what do you think were some skills that you learned during the role and beyond even now?
Yeah. So I'll say technical skills, most important one, knowing your way around the social platforms.
Yeah.
If you're watching this video, one of the things I always say when I come to Rutgers is if I was to hire someone who's in this class, on day one, if I was to hire on my social media team, I would expect you to know more than me about social media channels, because you, by nature of just your age, you've sort of grown up in the age of social media. As I said, when I was at Rutgers, there was no Instagram and there was no TikTok. There was only Facebook and other social platforms, which are probably not around. So I didn't grow up in the age of social. If I grew up in the age of social, I'm sure like you, Princess, I'm sure if I went to your TikTok algorithm or your Instagram, you can navigate around there with your eyes closed, right? Because it's native to you. It's just something that is, and now think about kids who are born right now, who are 5 years old,
Yeah.
who from the moment they're five, they're like on a tablet already. Think
Mhm.
about where they're going to be when they're 24 and how much information they'll have thanks to AI and all the so technical skills was really being deep into platforms. That's super important. As I moved along the way, always being abreast of what tools are out there, whether it's content management tools like the Hootsuites and the sprinklers, social listening tools, really important. there's a lot of different social listening tools out there. There's net-based. There's a new one I've been experimenting with called Quid. I'm sorry, not Quid, Plot rather. NetBase Quid is one company. There's another called Plot, which actually helps solve a problem that many marketers have, which is someone is showing your product or talking about your product, but they don't tag it, right? It's like you take a selfie today and you're wearing an outfit and your sweater is by a certain retailer. If
Yeah.
you don't tag that retailer, they can't engage.
Hmm.
There's new software out that will say, hey, Princess got her sweater from this store. And now that store using this tool can say, hey, Princess has just posted wearing our hottest fall sweater, the blue sweater. And now they could come in and they could come in and comment under your post so they can engage with you. You're like, oh, that's cool. Like I wore this sweater from the brand and there are my comments. That means a lot. That would probably make you go back and shop with them, right?
Yeah.
So those are some of the tools that I'm really interested in. I think soft skills is being a people person. Although this is social media, like it's almost like conversation. What are the things, how do you communicate with people? How do you show up with empathy, right? Something happens in the world, or you just going to continue posting like 2 for 1 today, get our whatever. No, you have to be empathetic and look and say, hey, this thing has happened. It may be happening all the way across the world, but maybe it's a bad idea for us to be posting today. So I think that soft skills, working with a lot of different types of people is a huge part of my job. Lots of personalities. So when you work in a social and comm space, you sort of a lot of times sit at the center of what could be marketing, PR, corporate comms, even executives, right? And don't forget analytics and insights. All of those people typically are very different personalities and they show up in different ways, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to make a caricature, but you got like your publicity person who's mover and shaker doing stuff. You maybe have your insights person who's less so, and they're like deep into the numbers and they're crunching. I need to sit at the hub and I need to be able to speak the language of all of those folks. And I need to be able to bring that back. So that is a soft skill that, you don't really learn that in the classroom.
Hmm.
That is something you learn just from like learning how to work with people and understanding what motivates them. So those are some of the technical and soft skills I think have been valuable for me.
Well, that's definitely true. I feel like having that, like, those personable skills are very important, especially when you're working on like campaigns and like strategy, like social media. I think a lot of it is very personal, and you have to kind of think a lot about like, who am I talking to like with this campaign, or who am I like, who's my target audience, and like how can I effectively communicate like to them with that. So I think that's definitely very important and a great skill to have. And I know like you've had a very impressive career, and there has to have been like obstacles or definitely like bumps in the road during your career. So I was wondering if you can talk about one of the biggest challenges or hardships that you faced in your career and how you kind of worked through that.
Yeah, I am challenges in my career. I think, it was very interesting working at Twitter X during the time where it was being taken over.
Mm.
And it was such a unique situation because here I was working at this company, which had become the number one story on the news, right? Every night I would go home and parents, old Rutgers teachers, people I hadn't talked to in years would be like, hey, I saw in the news that Elon bought Twitter and he's firing half the company any day now. Like, are you going to have a job? And honestly, I didn't know if I was going to have a job, right? So it was a lesson in working and trying to like block out the noise. Also, it's a real life lesson in like crisis management, right? So much of what we do in comms and social is like crisis management externally. How do I manage this? I know this storm is coming. Like, what are the things I need to do to prep? And also, how do I message this coming out of it, right? And those were things I had to do for myself. So one was about prepping for the storm. Hey, the company is being reduced day by day by day by day. It's in the news. This thing is inevitable. It's coming my way. It's like you're out on a sunny day and you see that dark cloud and it's slowly moving your way. You're not going to stand there until you feel the rain and get wet to be like, I think it's a storm, right? You're going to see that thing and you're going to take action based on the sight of that thing. So that was one thing as a planning. And then the second was about messaging. So, naturally being part of a company like, and luckily I did survive that big chop when he got rid of half the company, but there were continued cuts on my team that happened for months and months and months. And eventually I wasn't at the company anymore. And that's the second thing is messaging. So when you go back out into the world and maybe If you're someone who's watching this video, maybe you have a job and for some reason you're laid off, or maybe for some reason the company you're working for no longer exists or it changes and your role is not there. And now you're marching into the next interview and you're like, oh, gee, how am I going to talk about this experience that I had and not let it be a negative thing because I'm no longer with the company? So
Mm,
that, again, messaging, working on the messaging of like knowing your own story, treating yourself like a brand and saying, well, actually, no, it wasn't me, Javid Lewis, who did something to Elon, and Elon was like, hey, you're out of here. This was part of a larger workforce reduction and all of these things, but knowing how to tell that story so that when you go into that next interview, the story makes sense. You're not going into the interview and being like, well, I don't know. I don't have a job anymore. Just like I
mm,
got, like no one wants to like sort of help that person. But if you have a strong story and you're able to articulate what you've gone through, why it's important, and what you can learn from it, which in my instance was I learned a very important lesson, which actually during the whole Twitter and Elon thing was I was on a team, which was a social team, but we were attached to revenue, meaning that we did social media projects for big brands, and those brands wrote Twitter checks for those projects. So if it was a Super Bowl and Doritos had a big ad and they're like, go to Twitter and do this thing, we
mm.
would design that Twitter experience. So
Uh,
we were connected to revenue.
yeah.
So when I was doing social media work, you could see how because of this idea, X company may have written us a check for $1 million or $2 million. That was what saved a lot of our butts on this particular team I was on. And it's something I've always kept with me is, as a social media professional, we're moving into the day and age of getting likes and shares is good. But if you think about you go into your first job, getting likes and shares will be good and your boss will be happy about that. But there may come a day where he's like, hey, can you get me signups? Oh,
Mm,
can you get me people to click to this link and actually do something?
yeah.
So always figuring out how you get closer and closer and closer to the business and the things that move the business, I think is super important.
Yeah, that's true. I definitely think there's so many different focuses that your mind has to be on, especially in a role like that. Like thinking of so many different aspects and how you can, of course, get to the final project or the final product, but also build more types of revenue for the company. I think that's very
Yeah.
important. But I did want to touch on what you were commenting on, like with the changes coming to the company, like during your time there. Do you have like sort of any advice for students who might be facing job insecurity? I know there's a lot of change within the market, especially for students who might be more in tech, like especially with the integration of AI and companies trying to sort of explore how they can use AI internally. I was kind of wondering, like, what advice would you give to those students who maybe currently job seeking or job hunting and switching positions? Like, what advice would you give to them?
Sure. Two pieces of advice I'll give is one, to really work on your personal brand, right? I know we all love posting to social media, whether your platform of choice is Threads or TikTok or YouTube Shorts or Instagram. you know, are there things that are relevant to your work that you'd be willing to post on social media, right? I know a lot of people may be corny to, go on your social media and you're talking to your audience about something that's related to your job, and people are like, well, this doesn't have to do with me. Why are you talking about it? But if you want to attract an audience of that, so a great example of that would be if you're in community management, are there community management tips that you can share,
Mm,
right? And you can share those. You can use Reels, you can use TikTok. There are things that you can do to help yourself. Again, help yourself stand out. Here's what I learned. Here's things I learned about doing community management for X brand over the past 1 year
mm,
after college. And you're putting out bits every day. Eventually, you'll connect to the right audiences. Worst case scenario, you don't connect to the right audiences and you have a bunch of videos that gotten a couple hundred views that only your friends have seen. But now when you're interviewing, you can go to that interviewer and say, hey, here's how passionate I am about this. For the past year, I've been posting on my personal TikTok things I learned doing community management for X brand. Been posting. I got 16 videos right here. You can see all of the things that I learned. That shows a lot of passion, right? That's going above and beyond where most people. So I think working on the personal brand is super important. And you should treat yourself as if you were talking about a celebrity or Beyonce or whatever. Like think about how you're showing up on these platforms. And then the second one is sort of related, which is that uh, the old just resume, revisit the resume and feel like, how can you make it more you? How
Mm.
can you make it feel more young? How can you make it feel more youthful? How can you make it bring that flavor that we all have to the resume, right? Because you got to imagine now people are submitting online. Your HR manager, you just put a job on LinkedIn, and now 400 people have sent their resume in. How much time are you spending on each of those resumes? Maybe 30 seconds if you're lucky. Someone will look at that resume and that pile, right? What are things that you can do visually? Do you want to go beyond the resume and create so easy to create a website now, again, with the use of AI, if you have some assets, a simple one-pager website where it's like, I'm Princess. Here are the things I'm passionate about. Here's my past work. Here's a little about me. And you have that. That's another thing that you could be using when you meet people, when you network. People
Yeah.
come, that's impressive. She has a website. This video that you've done with me could be embedded in a website in a way that it's not embedded in your resume. So
Mhm.
now someone who's thinking about hiring you, they're coming, they're like, oh, I saw these really cool videos that she did with some different execs. She seems really nice. She seems like she's smart. I like this. They get much more of a flavor from you than just seeing that black and white resume in that pile of 400. So that was the second thing I would say is like revisit your resume.
Yeah.
One, make sure the resume feels like you, right? It should feel corporate, but it should have some flavor. Do you want to use some color in the resume? Like, are there little things that you want to write about yourself in the summary that gives the flavor, and then the rest could be super corporate? And
Mhm.
then also look at other creative ways that you can have a resume. Is it a video? Someone recently connected with me on LinkedIn, and I was like, they'd been messaging me for a while, and I didn't respond because I didn't know I couldn't help the person for what they were specifically asking for. And I guess they got frustrated, and then finally they made a YouTube. So they sent me a YouTube video, it was like 40 seconds. So then I was like, what's this YouTube video they've sent me? This is interesting. So I click on it, and it's the person talking to me. And they made it like this. And it was like 40 seconds.
Yeah.
That got me to respond to them because I watched it and I was like, this is creative. I was
Yeah.
like, this is creative. And as a comms person, it really made me think it's like, we're communications professionals. If we were trying to promote something, we would make sure we wouldn't I'm sure if I told you to make a social media post for me to raise awareness of this video, you
Yeah.
wouldn't just write a bunch of words on a slide and post that on Instagram. You probably would clip the video. You may do like a thing. That same creativity, bring that same creativity to your resume and show people from day one, from the time they see the piece of paper or from the time they see the video you submitted, like show them your personality from day one.
Yeah.
That's going to go a long way in helping you stand out.
Yeah, that's definitely true. That's very like an interesting story. I think that's like such a shocking way like to get someone to recognize you, but it's definitely true that you can do these small things that can bring people to your attention and kind of make yourself
Yep.
stand out. So I think that's something that's definitely very important within this current job market. But thank you so much again for taking the time to speak with us today. I know I learned a lot just from what you had to share about your experiences, and I think it's very important, like following your passions. I know, like you said, with your website and just working on like that passion project with your friend and how it led you to getting recognized by so many different people and kind of like catapulting different experiences within your career and giving you a lot of experience that you could comment on during interviews and kind of like use to your advantage to talk about like your personal brand and what you've done. So I think that's definitely very inspiring. And I think a lot of people will take a lot of good stories from this interview. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Princess. It was great talking to you. If you see this interview, feel free to connect with me on social media. I'm at Javid Lewis on all platforms. And I try to be active everywhere. So thank you. Always great seeing a fellow Rutgers student and enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.